Welcome to Shardlight Radio, the Argent Saga podcast, featuring interviews, card reviews, deck analysis, and much more. Shardlight Radio is your source to everything happening in the world of Argos.
And we're back on Shardlight Radio. I'm your host, Mr. Ben. And on today's episode, I would like to think out loud about the state of the game. There's a few things happening at any given time within a collectible card game. We have competing interest groups. There's the collectors, which typically tend to be more of investors. These are people who want to get the cards at the best price they can, and then later at some point intend to resell the cards. A lot of the investor collector, there's a point where these groups diverge, where there's the collectors who want everything and just hold on to it because that's the enjoyment they get out of card games. But generally, part of the enjoyment of collecting a complete set is knowing that you have the value attached to it. So in my admittedly anecdotal experience, does not constitute evidence, but in my experience, there's a lot of overlap in the collector-investor mindset, typically, but not always, of course. Then there are the high-level tournament players, the people who are attracted to a card game because it is a way for them to best competitors, either because they really enjoy competing, I fall into this category, or because they really want to chase those purses and they want being able to play the game to pay them back and do this as maybe not a job, but a side hustle. This is a way to pay for the hobby and maybe make a little something extra. I would love to be part of that category. The collectors, the competitors, and then there's the casuals. There's the people who enjoy the game and hoard the promos that they can get their hands on generally and try to build the best decks. But, maybe the highest level event they've attended is their locals and they're playing decks that don't have full play sets of all the bomb cards because they can't invest that heavily in the game or whatever the reason are. So you have to keep all of these different types of players happy in a CCG in order for it to survive. You also have to keep local store owners paid, and the company that generates the game also has to turn a profit. So all of these interests need to coexist, and in some ways they're competing, but if any one interest gets valued too heavily, the card game kind of starts to fall apart. So one of the things that we've been seeing over the last couple months with Argent Saga is that card values have been plummeting for a lot of cards. Things like a gold Luna was $200 a few months ago, and now people are talking 60, 65. I don't follow exactly who pays what for what card, but just a general trend that I've noticed across basically all rarities and all types is that card values have been falling. Now, some of the more sought after cards, the harder to get promos, have held they've been a little resistant to that trend, but it's fair to say that overall card values are coming down. Now, this is really friendly to a new player or to a casual player, somebody who is here because they really like the game, they like the mechanics of the game, and what they want to do is play with the cards, and the more tools they can get for a lower price, the more variations of this game they get to play. I definitely fall into this category somewhat too. While I do like to go and compete against other players and test my skills against resisting opponents at a high level, I also like to play with all the toys. And sometimes those two interests are very much at odds in me personally, but they're also to some degree a little bit at odds in the community as a whole. In any card game, when a card is good, when it's powerful, its value tends to increase. Even common cards, like a foil Bone Scavenger, commands a much higher price tag than you would expect for a common card to command, but it does so because it's such a valuable card, and to get one of those foil is a little bit more supply and demand. This is basic stuff. If you're playing card games, I'm sure you understand that. It is a negative for someone who is in the investor, and I did before lump together collectors and investors. Yes, the types of collectors who have no intent of ever reselling their cards, plummeting card values works out really well for them because all they want to do is get all the toys and then hold on to them. For the investor, however, this is terrible. You could end up in a negative position very easily, especially if you bought a lot of cards at the beginning of Argent Saga. I've seen Twilight Night go from people asking $100 to people asking $15. That's a huge dip. Now, I think it's arguable as to whether the cards ever should have been at these insanely inflated prices. Yes, it looks bad for the game. It makes it look like there is a negative trend line happening, and there is in terms of the overall value of cards. There is a negative trend line in card value, but I think this is more representative of a correction to where a new card game that has no track record of longevity. Let me stop for a second there. One of the reasons that cards reach these extremely valuable levels is because there's not that many of them, and the card game has been around forever. So you have a lot of people who want a fairly rare commodity. With Argent Saga, we had this weird situation last August where the cards came out and a lot of people wanted them, and then Betrayal stopped printing because they made corrections, made the cards better, and it came back. But during that little period of drought, card values were nuts. People were really excited about the new game. They really wanted to get their hands on things, and they were really willing to overpay. And that's what a lot of people did, particularly with Betrayal. When those Wave 2 boxes came in, they went out real quick, and now all of a sudden this very small card community, because we are a very small card community, we just got started. Everybody has everything they need, so the values on some of these cards started to go down. So if you bought into Argent Saga with the intent of holding a bunch of sealed boxes, well, first of all, if you're holding a bunch of sealed boxes, now would not be the time to sell. I mean, maybe it would. If the game absolutely fails, the sooner you can sell them, the better. My overall message today is one of optimism. I do not think the game is on a negative trend line that is indicative of the game not surviving. I think what has happened is a correction. I think the excitement caused people to overbuy at the beginning, and now we've hit a few stumbling blocks along the way, and it's causing a little bit of Chicken Little syndrome. Like, we see card values coming down, we see the pricing at tournaments coming down, which speaks to the competitive player. For the type of competitive player who wants to find the game where they get the most bang for their buck and they can put the most money in their pocket for winning, having purses reduce in value isn't a great sign. On the other hand, the game isn't even a year old, and I think it makes a lot of sense. I think it's arguable that they came out a little too generous with their pricing packages. I know that they had the Kickstarter and the plan but it seemed a little ambitious. And now what we're seeing is kind of a contraction in pricing, the same way we're seeing a contraction in pricing for the cards. And that's it doesn't feel great. As somebody who's a really big fan of this game and wants it to succeed, I don't like seeing these negative trends. And I'm not denying that it's there. It is true that attendance has gone down at events. I think an oversaturation of events has a lot to do with that. Pretty much for any one of these points of criticism, I think there are contextual factors that make it reasonable to go, okay, yeah, that's not positive, but here's why I'm not worried about it on a long trend line. Now, at a certain point, if card values continue to plummet, it will put stores in a position where, can we really afford to buy this product? And that's not great. But I just don't think we're there. I don't think that's reasonable yet. And I am not one of these people who is going, oh, this other card game did this and this other card game. I don't care about any of that. I'm not here to compare Argent Saga's overall life cycle or how they handle things to other card games, although it is a good idea to learn from the mistakes of other companies, other designers, and incorporate that into the game. I think that's positive, but I don't think this has to be a competition. I don't think when we look at a game like Force of Will and try to compare how it's doing to how Argent, they're just not the same thing. They're not going to necessarily appeal to the same audience. Sure, there's some overlap, and there is, in some sense, a competition happening in card games, but what brought me to Argent Saga was Argent Saga, the way the mechanics laid out. And I think that's true for everybody in my playgroup. We didn't get sucked in because we were looking for a new game. We got sucked in because this game was quality. And at the core of everything, that is the point that I value the most. I think if the mechanics are solid and the game is fun, that will counteract a lot of the other not great choices as far as distribution model that has happened, some of the contractions as far as pricing, some of the negative publicity that has come with how certain interactions with people in the community have been handled. Like, all of these other things are all factors that kind of weigh the game down to some degree. And I'm not ignoring them. I'm not pretending they're not there. I'm just saying I got my conviction packs and I've had a really good time playing with those new cards. And I'm looking forward to the next release to continue playing with these cards because I really like this game. I do want to see a vibrant tournament scene going. And part of the way you have a vibrant tournament scene is you need locals to function at a fairly high level, and in order for local game stores to want to buy in, there needs to be that secondary market, which in turn appeals to the investor type player. So if we have all of these pieces arranged correctly, then the game will continue to survive. Does it have to be as big as Magic, Pokemon, whatever? I don't care. I really don't care about any of that. All I want to be able to do is go get new cards when they come out and continue to play a game that I think is mechanically just really, really solid. One of the most solid games I've ever played as far as mechanics are concerned. Now, I'm not blind to the idea that a really good game can be destroyed through distribution errors, bad press. These outside factors can bring Argent Saga to its knees. I just think some of the people who are already saying the sky is falling are not paying attention to all the details and not properly evaluating. Like, you can say, oh, that's a negative thing that's happened, but if all you do is put all your focus on just the average card value has dropped, well, this is a brand new game. Should the cards have been that expensive to begin with? I think that's a question that is worth exploring, and it's not the overall life cycle of the game and the overall longevity of the game. I don't think is linked directly to cards never having a point in the cycle where they dip in value. That doesn't make sense to me. Sure, again, it's not a positive, but within the overall tapestry of where Argent Saga is, I feel pretty optimistic given how solid the game mechanics are, and that the team has shown they're willing to make changes to the way cards look, to distribution models. They've been very responsive to the community when we have complained about things that we think that they are doing wrong. I'm optimistic for the future.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Shardlight Radio. Remember to follow us on Facebook. If you like the show and want to support what we're doing, join us at patreon.com/thebuildphase to find out how. Special thanks to Ben Rueg for our fantastic new theme music, and until next time, go win some games.